Om Gyantimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chaksur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangulang Yete Girim Yatkripatam Aham Vande Shri Guru Dinataranam Vanchakalpatrubhyascha Kripa Sunda Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So again, thank you so much for joining us again to Leadership for an Age of Higher Consciousness. As we, the reason for these offerings of respect and these mantras very much are to, as I always say, make the impossible possible, but also to be able to go through the internal change that we're wanting to be able to execute so much of what is in this book. It's a really powerful way that all our teachers and mentors start before they have any type of discussion on topics for self-growth. So as we always bring, our culture is one of full presence, respect for all that have joined, and the determination to do the work that comes forward to us. I always like to remind ourselves of the two things we should always try to remember: what good others have done for us, to always be grateful; what maybe not so good or bad we have done to others, to keep us in the space of growing. And then finally, the two things that we should always try to let go of as best possible: the bad others have done for us, at least the feelings and emotions attached to it, and the good we may have done for others, again, so we don't rest on our laurels. So I just wanted to start off, and if everyone can just flip, it's at the beginning of the book, but I want to start just by reading at the start of each session these 10 common traits of a leader that we highlighted in the first session. If they're on page 5, but generally they'll be just in the first part of the book. But if someone wants to read the 10 traits, that would be great. I think it's really important just for us to remind ourselves, because everything we're talking about surrounds these 10 principles, and I would like to commit them to memory. So I'm hoping this can help facilitate that as also.
I think that's a good idea. I can read.
Please go ahead, Stacy.
They love people and are sensitive to their emotions and needs. They help people feel happy and secure. They create lasting value at all times. They are philosophers. They seek to convey ultimate abiding truth. They lead from the inside out, knowing that character is power. They are principle-centered. They are powerful visionaries. They keep everyone engaged according to their propensities. They are experts at delegation and empowerment. They are servant leaders who leave behind a culture of enduring excellence. Thank you.
Did anyone have any thoughts or reflections? I know we're coming back to it after a few weeks, but just in the context of anything we've read or anything that's occurred to them, or have they experienced any of these in their practical day-to-day life of leadership, which we all are in?
I have a comment, Ricken, as I read number 5 on character is power. One of the things that most stands out from the last series that you did was when that quote that you showed about, I haven't yet made this part of my character. And when I do, I can say that I've learned it. That really resonates with me, in that I've realized there's so much out there that we learn that we don't really know how to apply on that deep level to which it becomes our character. Like an example, you hear things like, "Oh, believe in yourself," or something like that, right? But but you don't know how to actually do that, right? Or things like that, right? That you just hear these trite kind of things that we hear. Yeah, that's what we should do. But then when you don't really internalize how to do it, and how and then integrate it into everything that you do, it just becomes, it's just like this knowledge. It's kind of like an analogy of a bridge that doesn't quite go across.
Yeah, really powerful. Just because you mentioned that, I'm just going to pull it up because it is from our discussion from Book of Dharma. And this is from Yudhishthira. remember, the eldest brother of the five great brothers in the Mahabharata, but also Arjuna being the second brother who receives the Bhagavad Gita. And he says, as exactly you said, I've not yet made that lesson part of my character. When I do this, then it could be said that I have retained it. So it's so much emphasis on application of what we know and not just gathering, because I think so many times we can fall into the habit of collecting as much as we can, even reading books, right? Reading books, people read voraciously. And then when it comes to, I often will just ask people, because I'm a slow reader. So I just ask people, for example, like, can you just tell me what this is about? And usually most times, maybe they'll remember some small details, but you're right. It's just that analogy of the bridge that you've made is a really powerful one. Ambika?
Mine is on a similar point to this, well, same as Stacy in terms of number 5, although I think leading inside out has kind of been the space that we come from in a lot of Ronnie, in the coaching work that Ronnie and I do. However, after last week's, and I'm gutted Avantika's not on this call, because after the case study of the conversation we had last week, and then she recommended Zero Limits, and that whole exchange happened in the WhatsApp group. I downloaded it. First of all, I've never completed a book in a week, but I have. And secondly, that book is so goddamn profound, and it takes, like, we would use you're at the source of everything in the context of when there's a breakdown. So if there's some issue out there with you and another, then how's it showing up in your space? Or with you and a whole body, how's it showing up in your space? How you're the source of it? Not, heck, there's a tsunami happening out there in Asia. How are you at the source of it? Or a spaceship hasn't launched at the NASA of it. How are you at the space of it? And simply using like powerful, the Ho'oponopono prayer, which the author talks about. But I think that aside, like, in our everyday life this past week, there's so many different people who reached out for coaching. And I've never used this approach before, which is, the reason you're reaching out to me is because there's something I've got to heal here within me. And doing just that Ho'oponopono prayer that's in Zero Limits, that's written by Dr. Hugh Len, has just been a complete game changer in terms of how we perceive the world in our space. And so leading from inside out has opened up a whole new dimension following last week's session, and then reading the book, and then being able to read this again, understanding it in a whole different way. So I'm really grateful to Avantika, and I will put it on the message as well, and to everybody who contributed towards the conversation.
That's really powerful. Thank you. I'm excited when people really are captivated by a specific topic and then read so voraciously. It's kind of you're reading with a different, intention, because you want to absorb as much as possible. So, I mean, kudos for getting through that as quick as you did. Any other reflections from these principles? I mean, 5 is just so powerful for myself. I'm always, it's very much a principle in anything we're doing. I always just ask myself, can I ask something of someone else if I haven't done it first, right? So it's just always a really important question, even when we're in relationships with family members and different things. Being the first one to do for as a principle of example, I think is just a really powerful way, because it's leadership that goes unspoken, but generally people will recognize actions over words. All right, so I wanted to move to section. This is a really this was from last week, but this week's content is a little bit shorter. But page 47, the topic is sacred power, divine power. So it really falls in this section of power, and again, what must be done with power. If someone wants to read, that would be great. Paul or Ambika?
Yeah, sure, I can go.
Please.
Unless Paul wants to. Paul, go for it. I saw you unmute. I did read last week, so I'm more than happy for you to jump in this week.
I would absolutely love to, and also actually share. I watched the recording last night. Rick sent it to me. It was one of those times in life where facing a very difficult leadership challenge where, and I listened to the recording, it was great because it seems that I'm not as mature a leader as I thought. And my impact and my intentions weren't necessarily aligned. So I'm still trying to catch up with the group and I'm a bit off. So it's not like me, but here I am. So which page did you want me to read from?
It was 47 in the new book.
Yes, I have the new book. Okay, 47. So that's the Sacred Power, Divine Power?
Yes.
Okay. Our focus here is sacred power, which comes from within. It is based on selfless, attentive service to God and spiritual law. Of course, there are different levels of sacred power. In a social sense, it's rooted in Varnasrama Dharma, or the division of society according to natural and spiritual laws. But beyond Varnasrama, and therefore beyond monarchy, there is the divine power of being totally in line with Krishna's will. Let us examine the relative positions of kings and priests, and Kshatriya has different position than Brahmana. Bhishma Deva's instructions on chivalry and the art of management are given to, my pronunciation could be better. So
Kshatriya.
How did you pronounce that?
Kshatriya.
Shakriya. Okay. And these instructions may not always be in accord with the instructions given to the Brahmanas, who are asked to practice straightforward honesty. Sorry, life always requires diplomacy, but a spiritually minded Kshatriya will only use diplomacy to bring about a higher good. For that higher good, he is ready to meet the challenge, to meet challenge, conflict, and war. One who is taking up the service of Kshatriya must be able to be both mild and, when necessary, fierce. Brahmanas are not prone to diplomacy. They speak the truth, whether it is palatable or not. And that's basically how I felt yesterday. A sacred leader working under sacred power always thinks about the people's welfare. A proper leader, as Bhishma explains, should know his constituents as well as a mother knows her children, and he should protect and care for them with great enthusiasm. A mother may sometimes reprimand her children, and other times she submits to their appeals. The two extremes of Kshatriya's mood, his ability to be both mild and fierce, are reconciled when he adopts the mood of a mother. His ultimate concern is to care for and protect his citizens, and he is prepared to do whatever is necessary to attain that goal. Because we don't see in modern leadership a strong desire to protect others, even in spiritual circles, problems are inevitable. Every social problem is connected either to the lack of proper leadership or the inability to recognize and trust proper leadership when it is present. Bhishma confirms this point by declaring that the king makes the age. The leader's consciousness determines the quality of that age, its atmosphere, and the mood of the people. Now, let us again turn to Bhishma's instructions to Yudhishthira. A Vaisnava is interested in seeing others' needs met, especially their greatest spiritual needs. Therefore, those who are most enlightened have the best potential and the requisite ability to lead. Such persons should be given management positions so that a society can be uplifted. Consensus or democracy may sound good, but when the majority is foolish, ignorant, or simply misinformed, their decisions cannot be trusted or relied upon. When judgment is not sound, unwise leaders are invariably chosen. Those leaders will then maintain their citizens at the same low standards. Again, it takes good leadership and recognition of good leadership to create a wholesome society. Continue?
No, we're good.
Okay.
Any thoughts or reflections? Just wanted to welcome both Christina and Avantika. So Avantika, we're in the book or the new book. It's called Sacred Divine Power, and it's on the top of 47. That's the section we just read. Just wanted to field any thoughts or reflections on this section. There are a couple of things that stood out for me. So one of the things that that has come up just, in a very short span 3 times, this section here, but a spiritually minded Kshatriya will only use diplomacy to bring the higher good. And if people go to the top of 40, there's this tension here that's brought up in leadership of the bottom of 39 and the top of 40. Bhishma Dev says at the bottom of 39 that kings should know how to conceal their plans, that they should know how to be diplomatic. At the same time, he states that a king must place great emphasis on the pursuit of truth. Although 2 statements appear contradictory, we should understand that Bhishma Dev is instructing Yudhishthira on how to manage the material world with the intention of bringing about the highest good. And then he uses the analogy of the prison, where the material world is essentially a prison for conditioned souls. It is filled with living entities with criminal mentalities who use and abuse what God has provided without giving credit or accepting that they are accountable to him. The king's main concern is to rehabilitate the prisoners. Managing the material energy is really about criminals becoming free. Rehabilitation has enacted the variety of methods. And then similarly on the page, is page 44, right at the top, or just going to the bottom of 43, says Bhishma says that a leader should be straightforward in his action and speech, and now he says that he should know when to conceal his own weaknesses. How do we understand this contradiction? His enemies will take advantage of weaknesses in his kingdom and try to destabilize or sabotage his rule. Therefore, any weaknesses in one's administration will be great targets for competition. A leader should give close attention to making strategic improvements whenever there is such weaknesses. So the point that I see brought up in these 3 sections is this idea of concealing, and this idea of concealing and also diplomacy. And so I just wanted to just create a discussion around this point of, can anyone resonate with this idea of diplomacy and concealment in their plans, but also being honest? And to me, the real powerful point that's brought out in all 3 sections is that diplomacy is specifically used by the leader for higher good. And B.T. Swami is very specific about what that higher good is. It always has to do with the spiritual evolution of the people that they're guiding, right? And so that's a very different higher good, I think, that most people think about than in the leadership position. And again, it's really trying to reconcile this tension of where the leader needs to conceal, but also and at the same time be diplomatic versus honest. But again, that diplomacy is always used here it's used in a way that will always be beneficial for the people. And again, I saw this in 3 different sections, so I just wanted to bring it out because I think it's very much at the core of what Paul was just reading, where it says here that the leader's consciousness, their mindset, is what determines the quality of the age, its atmosphere, and the mood of the people.
Ricken, can I just comment on the bit Paul read? Is kind of mind-blowing is the best adjective that comes to mind, because my way of being generally is characteristically what's described as the Brahmana's way of being, right? And many a times my husband has said there's got to be some element of not necessarily diplomacy, but it doesn't need to just stuff doesn't need to be said the way it is, right? And the irony here is, by descent and lineage, we are Kshatriyas, right? But I most certainly haven't mastered the art of concealing for the higher good of others. Or at least I can't think of examples right now where my natural go-to way of communicating and being and just how I operate is just I say it as it is, or not say it as it is, but I find life simple that way. And I find at times diplomacy is like a massive muscle to build. And I deeply admire people who know how to say exactly who get the communication across in a way that actually empowers everybody that hears it, versus is leaving anybody in a space of make wrong. And I, as I'm reading this, I'm perhaps getting that to just say what's on my mind without the filter process actually does a disservice to leadership. It's a detriment to the intention of empowering others, because inevitably, and it has most certainly happened, people get left disempowered. People do get left feeling made wrong. And we I have multiple times cloaked it with, but this is the accountability. I'm holding accountable. But actually, there is a way of communicating it with, with that diplomacy that actually has somebody want to lean in and rise to the occasion rather than kind of shrink because they're made wrong. And like, if something hasn't been done, it hasn't been done, but how do you get the broader context versus kind of just, and it may not be the context in which they talk about brahmanas and how they speak the truth. Of course, theirs is a different context, but for me, this is what I'm hearing this conversation, just that skill to build, to really come across, because Kshatriyas are the kings, we're the leaders, right? How do you bring that effectiveness in leading, using that that dual way of being?
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your personal experience, because I can very much relate. And the reason why this kind of lit up to me in the 3 sections was because I think naturally as leaders, sometimes we feel that, straightforwardness is the best policy, but that idea of diplomacy and being, there's a space for being cunning in leadership, because, I often talk about this with Ed, because we oftentimes are dealing with groups of people where there's conflict. And so we try to look at both people and we see, okay, what is going to be best for them to continue on in their respective role, but how do we do it in a way that's going to also, when we look at the how of what we're going to try to say, it's and sometimes that how we've come to understand that sometimes it may not even have to come from us, right? Maybe there's someone else in their life that will be able to relay to them, relay the message in a way that is going to be more palatable, but still can, keep them progressing. So I just wanted to really appreciate this point, because it is really very much an art on how to bring together both this honesty as well as diplomacy in our leadership. But I think it's one that's very much, I think everyone thinks about it when they come to a difficult conversation, and we all have been in that space, but how to do that. I think for me, that's really, if people have ever been through that course called Crucial Conversations, it's by Vital Signs. And in the crucial conversations, or in a conversation of conflict, the first principle is start with heart. So pretty much going back to what our intentions are, right? And I think once we can really, as a starting point, start with that, I think it really helps bring in this idea in a more practical way of balancing both diplomacy and honesty. But anyways, no, thank you so much, Ambika. Stacy, I wanted to hear from you.
Yeah, so I love that. I feel though that it's simpler than we think, just because of exactly what you said. When you speak from the heart, when you start every conversation with an intent of with an intent of getting of finding the best from everyone. I think that there is a way of speaking, and it can happen through prayer, right? Where you're not really speaking through your mind and your thinking mind, like, what should I say? But it comes from the heart. And that's something that I have been working on it as well, because I think when that happens, it flows, and the right words flow when you kind of start to let go, and it's more like a connection of consciousness as opposed to a real a thinking conversation. And when you can connect with someone in that way, I think that you have completely different conversations that aren't about, am I speaking the brazen truth or not? It's really just there's truth, but it's also part of like an energy vibration that people feel. And so I think you can get there, but it's not through maybe the way that we think.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's also a really powerful point of just a way to change our intention is what we tell ourselves before entering those kind of spaces. And again, prayer is a really powerful way to change intention to the positive. So that's, yeah, really, really powerful. And I've tried it myself. It really does work, especially when we're trying to grasp at straws to bring our best in a difficult situation. I think Avantika had her hand up.
Yeah, actually, this is me. I'm just been enjoying the conversation, but a couple of points that came to mind as I was hearing in is that probably situational leadership is really good, because instead of choosing one persona to play, having a mixed bag of strategies depending on the situation you're in. So choosing to be the Brahmana when needed, choosing to be the Kshatriya when needed, and so on and so forth, rather than kind of creating one size fits all approach. That's something that came to mind. And about the concealment and diplomacy aspect, I really liked this. When negotiations are done, which is largely about, a parent would know that a large part of whether it's bedtime or, how much time they're going to be out or whatever, there's so much negotiation involved, right? So even when you're just leading inside your household, and then when you're leading a team, there's a lot of negotiation. And then when you're leading, big units, there's a lot of negotiation. In that negotiation in Chanakya Niti, it said that the person who wins a negotiation is the person who reveals the least, who kind of just keeps a lot of things. So concealment is a strategy that parents, they won't say no, because they know that will lead to rebellion. They'll say, why don't we kind of, I'll think about it. I'll let you know, why don't we kind of do this? Or when it's a customer that you want a big contract from, you can't tell them that, your strategy sucks. You kind of say, these are the things that I really like about your things. And, in order to do, to really make this shine, you have such an amazing thing. Why don't we put this strategy in play? So, it is a little bit about concealment. It is a little bit about negotiation, and a little bit about diplomacy. And the final thing that negotiation and concealment, I think, in action is, in Mastermind, there's a beautiful course called The Art of Negotiation, and it's led by someone who does negotiations with suicidal people. So he's part of a SWAT team, and he goes in there, and people who are about to take their lives, how he's able to kind of, turn around the situation just by negotiating with them one baby step at a time. So he can't give them a huge offer and a huge thing and, whatever. He knows nothing about them. But yeah, that was just something I wanted to put out there.
Thank you, Avantika. It's always important to, again, this idea of diplomacy and concealment, I wanted to bring it out because it is a more subtle principle within leadership. And I think, again, our intentions and being mindful of our words can really help to kind of move us forward with this specific principle. So thank you. I just wanted to welcome Ed. Thank you so much for joining, as always.
Great to see all of you. Great to see you, Rikin, Avantika, Christina, Gabrielle, Stacy, Paul, Ambika, and also iPhone J.
Oh, I just wanted to, I'm pretty sure I wanted to introduce my friend Jide. Jide lives in Toronto, okay. And he's a director for change management for mergers and acquisition here in Toronto for a company.
Okay. Nice to meet you.
He's familiar with BT Swami's work through the group Upbuild. We discuss BT Swami quotes in Remembering Who We Are. Oh, and so Jide has joined those calls, and we just met up yesterday after a while, so he was interested in joining in.
Okay, Jide, it's a real pleasure. Any friend of Rikin and the Titans is a friend of ours, so thank you for joining. How's everyone doing?
Good. We were just in this chapter of Sacred Divine Power, and it was page 47, but we're specifically talking about this point where it comes up a few times, where it talks about how do we kind of merge diplomacy and honesty, so concealment and honesty, and the point that BT Swami brought up on all occasions was really specifically the focus for the leader is always the highest good of the people they're leading.
Yes.
And we define that as the spiritual evolution of the individual.
That's brilliant. That's really brilliant because that's the highest type of growth. You know, some people, they try to grow on a physical level, right? So going to the gym and so on. Some will try to grow on a mental or intellectual level, but the highest type of development or evolution is definitely the spiritual, the evolution of consciousness, actually. But I do mean to, was there anything else you wanted to?
No, we just finished this section. And then I guess the second point that I wanted to bring up in this section was this point on how Bhishma Dev explains the one a leader should know his constituents as well as a mother knows her children.
Yeah.
I thought that was really another powerful point because it refers to care, right? And when I think about care in leadership, someone who's personable, someone who's approachable, someone who can be vulnerable when necessary, someone who's supportive, and overall not self-interested. I think we've all met leaders like that, and I think it's so easy when we're in leadership positions to want to get things done. And I oftentimes have to kind of sometimes put on the brakes and focus on this point of really investing in the people. Our mentors, Ed, will say they're very much people over projects, because if we've cared for the people, then naturally the project will unfold. And it's something that we've seen amongst some of our mentors, and it's a really powerful principle to lead by. It just takes, I mean, for me, it's taken a lot of active training to be in that mindset.
Wonderful. And it's funny you talk about mentors, because one of Rikin's mentors, a key mentor, Radhanath Maharaj, he's actually in the UK at the moment. You know, so like there's some different, we saw him, he gave a class yesterday evening. It was as always inspired. It was really brilliant. So yeah, absolutely. I definitely take your point. So what I thought we would do is, first of all, I'm going to ask, does anyone recall what we were discussing last week? Because we got it to a certain point, but we had to hold off from doing a particular activity just because of time. So does anyone recall what we were discussing last week, please?
So we were talking about, you were going into the benefits of journaling.
Yes.
And you listed out, you were quoting just a study that was done by James Pennebaker on the benefits of journaling.
Absolutely.
That's one of the distinct topics that stood out from last week's discussion. And I know there was going to be an exercise tied to that.
Absolutely. So before I get into that, just very quickly, anything else that came to mind from last week before we get into the activity, which will start shortly? Okay, so what I'll do is I'll share my screen. Actually, before I share my screen, I'll just give that additional framing. So yes, thank you, Rikin. What I want to really draw your attention to is, to be honest, sometimes as a leader, it can be lonely at the top. And there's an incredible surge in some communities around the world who are understanding more about how pressure affects both the body, the mind, the intelligence. When we are leaders, our capacity is the capacity of the people that we lead. Okay, let me just pause there before I get into this. Show of hands, how many of you have ever known a leader who was starting, because of not being able to handle the pressure that he or she was under, was starting to maybe be snappy with people, maybe make decisions which were suboptimal, and was starting to lose or erode his or her own capacity to lead? Has anyone ever seen that happen in their career or in their time? Okay, I can see how interesting. Practically all of us. Now, I want to explore that because it gives context to why we're talking about this research from James Pennebaker. We want to talk about the objective behind what we're going to suggest. So what happens when the leader's in that space, right? When he or she, although, and I love the quote that Rikin was talking about, the leader knowing their constituents like a mother knows her children and caring for them accordingly. What happens when a leader does not care for him or herself accordingly? How do they, unfortunately, and even unwillingly, betray their people when they don't care for themselves? Let's start there. Any thoughts? If a leader doesn't care for him or herself, how does it negatively impact the people that they are trying to serve? Feel free to speak whenever. You can unmute and just unleash.
Hi.
Okay, so we'll have Ambika and then we'll go to Gabrielle. Great to see you both, by the way.
So from my experience, how does it negatively impact people in every way? From my personal experience. So when I'm not looking after my mental well-being or physical well-being, not honoring sleep or just any of those spaces, I show up in rooms as not present. So already not fully energetically, mentally cleared. So I'll show up to rooms just already in my head about some past conversation versus being fully here right now, ready to serve and make a difference to others. And then secondly, I'm already at the disposal of mental toxins, such predominantly judgment and attachment to the other showing up, needing to show up a certain way, right? I'm more prone to that conversation going in a certain way because my mental construct is not at its optimal. Therefore, the conversation gets reduced to seeing others as set, fixed ways, how they should be or shouldn't be, whether it is coaches we're training or whether it's somebody who's reached out for coaching or even my kids. It's really just a negative downward spiral because I didn't really honor and look after my faculties in order to show up as whole and complete in whatever that conversation or situation is. The negative effect and spillover is across all realms, always.
Thank you so much. And I'll be honest with you, what you said really touched me because I was doing some research recently about this and on many different levels. And one of the pieces of research I came up with, we may get into it more as appropriate in the future session. They've done studies. For example, there was some studies of Jewish young people, Jewish children who were in Hungary at the time of one of the world wars, you know, and it was very, very interesting. There was an anecdote. The mother, she calls a doctor and she says to the doctor, "Doctor, can you please come and spend some time with my child because my child's crying all the time?" And the doctor says to the mother, this is in war, you know, this is a whole kind of, you know, the World War, you know, the whole Nazi Germany situation. And then the doctor says, "I'll come and see your child, but you should know that all my Jewish babies are crying all the time at the moment." Now, this was an anecdote shared by one Jewish person who was a child at the time of that particular World War. And what he was explaining is that the kids, they didn't know anything about the war because they're just children. What the children were picking up on was the stress of the parents. Energetically, they were picking up. So they were picking up that my parents, that capacity, they're under lots of pressure. And because of that, I'm also feeling that disturbance as well. So there is always an energetic connection between ourselves and those that we are trying to give protection, shelter, guidance to. It can be of a very subtle nature or of a more subtle nature when those people are adults, because they have their own system of filtering through those energies. And it can be of a more direct nature when they're very young children, but we're always in that energetic relationship or connection. So what you said really, really triggered that reflection from some research that I was doing. So thank you very much for that, Ambika. Was there anything else you want to add before I go to Gabrielle?
Just one quick point on that. So day before yesterday, my 5-year-old comes home with his first ever homework. It literally took, I don't know, 5 to 10 minutes. It was simple tracing, but I was rushing for a meeting. And I was already like in my head around stress, meetings, knock on. And in that moment, like when I was sitting down for that conversation with this 5-year-old who's just simply tracing lines and counting numbers, there was such a restlessness and anxiety and then like trigger and then anger. I literally became my dad when he would be teaching me when I was a young kid. And I had not such great memories of that, right? Like it would be short, snappy. And I was sharing with coaches that I got on shortly after that meeting, because that 5 to 10 minute interaction, because there was so much guilt that pursued and came off like here where I am as a repercussion of how I was being earlier with my son. When I got on the call with these leaders that we train, I literally was in full sob state because there was so much make wrong. So it's not only the impact on others, but the the almost boomerang effect where the impact on us is like tenfold more when we're actually left to reflect on actions. And so it's like a vicious cycle, and to just clear ourselves using these kind of spaces and tools is so important.
Absolutely. And first of all, thank you for your vulnerability. And I want to just really highlight the objective before we go to Gabrielle. The key thing I want to posit with all of you, and not just in our sessions, but at every moment in your life, your investment in your own well-being when you're a leader is simultaneously the investment in every single person that you're leading. You know, and our own neglect as leaders means to, and I love the way you put it, Ambika, it means that we will not show up in our optimal and energetic state in every decision that we make, in every interaction that we have, in every effort or endeavor or project that we initiate as well. So there is a natural synergy between us and other people. I'll tell you just a little point. I'm gonna do a TED talk, right? So I've been working on the content, and I was thinking about how to start it. And what really came to my mind, I had this thought. I may or may not start it like this, but I'll definitely include this. Well, I realized, and I was discussing this with some close friends, we say that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, okay? But no one is able to explain why. And I had a strong realization that really helped me I saw why. I saw this vision. So what I saw was, say you have 10 people. So all 10 people are there. Let's say that you have a picture of them. So we know that each person may have a certain level of productivity. So 10 people, let's say that their productivity, we can measure it. So let's say it has a numerical value. So 10 people, their productivity of each person is 10. So 10 times 10, the overall productivity, if each person is just sharing their own individual contribution, is 100. So then we say that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, but very few people have a model that really explains it. But I saw the model. I saw the model that explained it. In my mind's eye, I saw the 10 individuals. And then in my mind's eye, I saw a line between each individual and other individuals. And then I realized, yes, what the person produces individually, that has value. But there's also value in the relationship between those individuals. So when we say that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, what we mean is you have what the individual produces independently, and then you have what's produced in the relationship between individuals. And that also has a numerical value. And that numerical value, ladies and gentlemen, the better the relationship between those individuals, finish the sentence for me. If the relationships have a numerical value, then we know that the better the relationship between those individuals, what happens to the numerical value of that relationship? It goes up. You see, that's how the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. In the Vedas, they have this term, Sambandha Gyan, which means literally the knowledge of relationship. As I've been studying these texts of Bhakti Yoga, well, I've started to see, it has absolutely changed my life. I say that honestly, with no reservation. What I've started to see is that there's additional knowledge when I look at the relationship between different pastimes, for example. When I look at the relationship between different philosophical points, for example. When I look at the relationship between certain laws or principles, for example, then I can gain from that relationship additional insight. So when we say the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, we mean that each person generates a certain level of productivity, and that each interrelationship also generates a certain level of productivity or outcome. That's how the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So to Ambika, your point, and I want to hear from you, Gabrielle, in a moment, when we're not looking after ourselves properly, we're also impacting the relationship between ourselves and others. As you said, I make a suboptimal choice. I'm a bit irritable. I'm not necessarily showing up for the other people that I'm speaking to or interacting with. In other words, I've degraded the quality of the relationship in that moment. And therefore, even though the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, I'm not getting as much of an optimal outcome as I could otherwise achieve. Does that make some sense? Okay, Gabrielle, we wanted to hear your point. Please share.
I'm not sure I find back to my point, but I find new points, so it doesn't matter. I just thought it's very interesting because we started with the point that when we are stressed, to be a good leader, you shouldn't be stressed, right? It doesn't matter. You have to lead your family, or you have to lead a firm, or you're a political leader. When you're stressed, you are, it's dangerous that you make wrong decisions or you treat people wrong. And if you're relaxed, you're much better. You do much better. And what I realized is that in our Western society, most people have a sort of mantra. They say, time is money, time is money, time is money, because they're selling their time for money. But from my personal mantra, I find from myself is time is life. And so I can take as much time as I want. So everything which will be put in front of me, I can take as much time as I want. It doesn't mean you know in the business world that you can smash all your schedule, but I think it's very, very important. I know that from my personal life, and I also know it from quantum physics, that we should think about time from a different perspective, because when we take the time to call to as you said, or also as Ambika said, when as a parent, when you're stressed, you do mistakes, or you're stressed. And I find, yeah, now I find back, sorry, because you said you have to take care of yourself. So I think it's very, very, very important that all people, even in the Western world, take more time for themselves. This was actually the basic sentence of what I want to say. It's very, very important to take time for ourselves in nature. Yeah, I mean, it's basically everybody knows it, but very often we are, even also myself, we have such a huge schedule, we just forget it. We are just putting too much in the schedule. So when the week starts, I think it's very, very important that we are not putting too much in the schedule, because if then it happens, it will get out of control. And then our feelings and our mind will get out of control. So when we start from the beginning, not to putting too much in our schedule, we are mentally in time, in this language of time, and mental and emotional, we are more flexible. We can adjust. For example, when I'm a mother and my child will becoming ill, then everything will be messed up. Or when your schedule is too tight in your business and things, you have to adjust. You cannot adjust if you make things too tight. And if you make it more loose, if you take more time for yourself, you have time to gift. And for me, time is like love. If I give time to, let's say, a child on the street, or an older lady, or even in business, no matter, if I gift time. So it's for me like to give love, because I take the time and I give the time to another person. And if somebody's coming and needs my help, and I say, no, my schedule, I have no time, then I'm exactly at the point we were talking before. If my children needs me and I say, no, or in business, somebody wants, no, it's always because I'm not able to take enough time. So when I write from the beginning of the week, I make sure that the schedule is not too tight. I take the time from myself, but at the end, it's I would call it a God's law. I take the time from myself, but at the end, all my lifetime is a gift from God. So I can gift it to the people. They will come in this free time I make myself. All the people that come in my life, then I feel like they are sent from God, so I can gift them my time. And then it's a circle. I become also back time, because somehow it's a miracle that then the universe will give a little bit space for me, that it offers me some money, that I'm not in too crazy time schedule. And then I'm happy because somehow some money is coming my direction. And I say, thank you, God. And then I have some space of time and I can gift my time again. I know it takes some braveness to do it, to say, I gift my time, because we're all trained to say, no, I sell my time because time is money. So I sell my time. So if I do something, money needs to be the outcome. But I just made some experience in my life to just do it a different way. And it worked. And yeah, I just want to say this. It's important to change the mantra from time is money to time is life. It's my lifetime, and lifetime is love. And I love to live a life with love and selling, and not selling and gifting time, not selling time. Yeah, but I know it's still a bit difficult in our Western culture, because we're also in this old circle system of how will I survive if I am not selling my time, or when I'm the entrepreneur, if I'm buying the time from another. We're all very much in that. So we are all a little bit afraid of the belief system that I can be in the money flow without, let's say, becoming trapped, without feeling too dependent on it. Because as soon as we are dependent, we are not brave enough to break rules, to make new rules, better rules for new mantras, for new belief systems. Okay, now I said enough.
Thank you very much for sharing that, Gabrielle. And I just want to take that point further on. So yes, so the point is that if an investment that we make in ourselves is the investment we're making in the relationship with those people that we're leading. There was a very interesting challenge that someone made recently to another person. So there was a conversation about about compassion fatigue. And so someone was talking about compassion fatigue, and it was very interesting with the response. The response was that there is no such thing as compassion fatigue, right? And people thought, well, what do you mean? Like, people do get tired, they try to give, and then they break down if they don't, balance up. And the speaker was saying, he said, there's no such thing as compassion fatigue. There's more a lack of self-compassion fatigue. He said that someone who's constantly trying to give to others, and when you're leaders, you are giving in many subtle ways, by the way, in many subtle ways. They said that what happens is when it's again, this is what I'm going to speak about in the TED Talk. It's about the relationships. You say so, Gabrielle, to your point and to Ambik's point, one person says, okay, I'm giving so much. Is it a problem? Yes or no? That's not enough to answer the question. The question is, what's the relationship between what you're receiving and what you're giving? If you're receiving enough, in other words, if you're caring for yourself enough, you can be giving to a lot of people, because it's the relationship between the two things. It's not whether you're looking after yourself or whether you're looking after other people. It's the relationship between how much you're looking after yourself, how much you're receiving, and how much you're giving. It's always the relationship. You see? To your point, Gabrielle, in the Western cosmology, it's more, I studied this at university. I studied philosophy and economics. They call it the Cartesian way of looking at the world. It came from a philosopher named Descartes. So he saw the world as a machine. He saw the body as a machine. So if something goes wrong, you just take out the bit that's not working, you fix it, and everyone goes on. Now that's different to what we consider in the Vedic or the ancient teachings of Bhakti Yoga, the Bhagavad Gita, etc. They have what they call, the system is called Brahman, right? Which is a unified system where everything is tightly interwoven to everything else. So if I'm not receiving enough and I'm trying to give much more than I'm actually receiving, then at some point there'll be a disconnect. See, it's the relationship between the two. That now, this is why we're going to go into this activity about self-care and how it relates. This journaling that we spoke about is a means by which we can also help to regulate and look after ourselves. And there will be, ladies and gentlemen, many tremendous effects. So with James Pennebaker, I just want to give you some background as to what he did. He started by doing some research, and you can find a lot of his material online on YouTube, different talks. Basically, what they found was that when people go through traumatic experiences and they don't talk about it, what happens is it then affects their physical, biological system. What they found, and there's also other psychologists who looked at this, they found that when an individual suppresses their emotions, they are simultaneously suppressing their immune system, right? Now, this is really key for a leader. Why? Because leaders sometimes feel alone. Leaders sometimes have to make decisions which are not popular. If we as leaders don't have systems of healthy self-care, healthy self-nourishment, then after a certain point, we may feel drained, leading to these dysfunctional patterns, these dysfunctional decisions, these dysfunctional endeavors, which cost not only us dearly, but they will also have repercussions to the people that we're leading, because to the point that Bhishma Dev says, the leader, when it says he should know his children, I mean, should know his dependents like a mother knows her child, it means that leadership is a position of what we call vatsalya. It's called a parental mood, a protective mood to it. You see? So when you're a leader, you are in some way, shape or form providing shelter to others. Now, there's two other interesting anecdotes I want to share with you before we go to the activity. There was one Western psychologist who was going to spend some time with shamans in certain remote traditional environments. And, you know, he had come with a group of doctors, and the shamans said to him, they said to him, look, they did some chanting, actually. They did some chanting with the group. And these are Western doctors, and they went to have this experience. But after a certain period, the shaman said to this lead doctor who had arranged the entire thing, he was one of the speakers actually there. They said to him, you know, you're not going to be able to take part. All right, we're gonna have to take you aside from everyone else. And he was a bit shocked because he was meant to give some keynote speeches or etc. And they said, you can't be involved. And then they told him something. And this is something that I heard from B.T. Swami also. They said to him that as a doctor, as a psychologist, you've been trying to help other people. But what you've done in the process is you're carrying all this heavy energy from the people that you've been trying to help with their traumas, their difficulties. You're carrying their energy energetically. And it's blocking your ability to help them, and you're actually slowing down their own progress. What they did is they took that person to one side and they worked with him for a few days just to help to release him of some of the energy that he had been carrying from the people he'd been trying to help. My spiritual teacher, B.T. Swami, he said the same thing decades ago in a class. If I can find, I'll try and share the audio. But he said that when you're in a position of leadership, authority, care, when you're a healer of some type, if you don't also look after yourself, what will happen is you don't know it, but energetically, you're carrying some of the responsibility, some of the energy, some of the karma of the people that you're trying to help. So when we talk about this activity we're going to do, when we engage in this activity of working through some of the things that we've experienced, you should understand that what it will do over time, if you continue the practice, it will help you to unload some of the energy of the people that you're leading, some of the people that you're caring for in your life. It will make you energetically a bit stronger so you can continue to do what you do. Now, there's one other study I want to bring to your attention. I was looking at this recently. They did a study of people who get attacked by criminals. This is very, very interesting. And what they did is they tried to find out, and they actually asked the criminals, they showed them images of people, of different people, and they tried to figure out what type of people would be more susceptible to being attacked by criminals, right? And the criminals highlighted particular individuals who they were more likely to attack. And to get to the conclusion of this, they found that people who, by their body language, by the pace of their walking, by their demeanor, seemed a bit more burdened, a bit weaker, those were the people who were more likely to be attacked by the criminals. Now, the opposite was also true. People whose energy, to Ambika's point, people who were energetically more open, whose body language, demeanor was more purposeful, seemed more competent and more confident, those individuals were less likely to be attacked by criminals, because we're carrying a certain energetic field. This is why the Vedic knowledge is so superlative, because it's much more subtle than people realize. So to this exercise, what they found when people wrote about those traumatic experiences, and we're not going to do that, by the way, we're not going to ask you to write about traumatic experiences, but just difficult experiences as a leader. Okay, so we're going to pick it to be something that's within the realms of something we can discuss and engage in with our time. We don't want to open up a Pandora's box. If you want to do something a bit more deep like that, obviously we encourage you, you have free will, but maybe do it with guidance from a professional, or in a certain space where you're only opening up to something that you're comfortable to process. Okay, but the research was phenomenal. They found that when people wrote about traumatic experiences, in the first 2 weeks, they felt they felt some sadness about it. But beyond those 2 week, that 2 week period, the people became more confident, their immune system improved. There were so many benefits, because when we go through difficult experiences and we keep them to ourselves energetically, we don't talk about those experiences. They have negative effects, both energetically, and then that starts to also play out biologically as well. There's a lady named Tara Brach, B-R-A-C-H, and she writes about things such as what they call radical acceptance. She also talks about, this is a term she does, I'll use this term, but she talks about what I would call emotional hygiene, because we don't know what to do with our emotions. So some people, whatever they feel, they unleash it. And even if it's negative, and that can damage relationships. Other people, they think, oh, I shouldn't be angry, I shouldn't be upset, so they suppress their emotions. That also causes destructive outcomes. So linking to what Rikin spoke to you about today, as a leader, you may have to conceal certain things at certain times. You may not be able to reveal everything to everyone at certain times. So then the question is, what do I do with those emotions? What do I do with that knowledge? What do I do with those feelings? This is what you can do, this exercise. This is all about transmutation of emotions. So we're going to get you to write about a difficult experience that you've been through as a leader. And in doing so, we want you to think about a few factors. I'm going to share my screen now on this. So actually, let me change up one thing before I share my screen. Bear with me one moment. Okay, so I've got some prompts. So let's share the research first. Okay, so we can share like that. Okay, so I'll share my screen now. So this is what we spoke about last week, some of the benefits of journaling. And I encourage you to look some of this stuff up. It is groundbreaking stuff, and it can transform. It's done a lot for me. And the real art to this is the more you can share about things which are important, meaningful, significant, and bear strong feeling for you, you're literally able to release some of that energy, and that energy that's released comes back to you in the form of, as we said, stronger immune system, lowered symptoms of asthma and rheumatoid arthritis, less stress, better self-knowledge, and so many other things. So what we're going to get you to do is this writing, the following activity. We want you to write about a mistake you made, or a weakness you have, or a difficulty that you had as a leader. Where did it show up? So what was the situation? What impact did that difficult decision have on you, others, the situation? What was the cause of it? So now in the expressive writing, we're going to do some deep analysis. Why did I get into that situation in the first place? And most importantly, we come out the other side. What's the gift of wisdom that I gained through the experience? What did I learn about myself that needed to change? I want to be open and vulnerable to you and give you an example. I was reflecting on my life recently. There was a period many years ago, I was pushing my body way too hard. I cut back on sleep. And so at a certain point, it caused a backlash. And then my body went into this state of like long-term fatigue, chronic fatigue. And I was trying to figure out, how did I get into this situation in the first place? And it came to me a few days ago. I realized, if I was honest with myself, there was a period in my life where I thought I need to do more things. And I thought, okay, that's not bad. But then I tried to dig beneath the surface. Why? There's a system that some leaders use called the 5 whys. So you try to get to the root cause of something by you look at something and you say, why? And then you go a bit deeper through it, and you ask why. And you try to ask why to go deeper and deeper into the root cause. And if I was honest with myself, what I realized is there was an insecurity. If I was honest with myself, I was trying to do more and more and more because I felt that I needed to prove myself by doing more. And at the root of that pushing my body too much was an insecurity. And I realized, yes, that's the root issue that you need to look at. And if you can sort that out, so many other things will automatically be dealt with. So trying to get to the root underlying cause of something can be very, very powerful. And this exercise we're going to do is a very powerful thing. You can also do this collectively with groups, in teams. So there's something going wrong in our organization. We start to break it down. Why is this happening? And we try to get down to the root cause. And then when you solve something at the deepest level, it takes less effort for more outcome. Isn't that amazing? The deeper the solution is, the less effort it makes and the much greater impact it has. This is why in the Vedic literature, we talk about consciousness all the time, because we know that if a leader, if a society, if we can purify our consciousness, raise our consciousness, spiritualize our consciousness, for every moment spent on that level, the impact is incredible. Yeah. Anyway, so these are some things we want you to think about, and we're going to give you, first of all, we're going to give you 3 to 4 minutes to write, to just write, okay? And then what we're going to do afterwards is we're going to ask you, but only to share what you're comfortable in sharing. So do not worry, and don't let the sharing aspect mitigate what you're writing. The more you're open and honest in your writing, let me repeat this. I've done this before. It's such a powerful exercise. I promise you, it's such a powerful exercise. The more that you are honest and open in your writing, the more powerful the effect of the exercise will be for you, okay? So don't hold back, but right within whatever you're comfortable in sharing. So a situation, a circumstance where there was some issues, a crisis, a mistake, something that didn't go well, something that may have impacted you negatively. Now let's get that out on paper so we can release both that emotional, intellectual energy that's being trapped when we hold on to stuff. The one last thing I'll share is that the research shows that when you label an experience, it reduces anxiety. When an experience remains in our head, it can affect our body and our system because it's pervasive, it's general. When I label the experience, this is what happened. This is what I felt. This is the emotion I felt. This is why it happened. This is the situation, the specifics. It brings that label into a crystallized space, okay? So what we're sharing, I'll tell you, this has been a life-changing tool for me. And I can honestly say, anyone who does this on a regular basis, you will be able to, you and the people close to you, they'll be able to see the transformational effects it has. Okay, 3 minutes to just write. And then after 3 minutes, we're going to go into the sharing. Over to you for the next 3 minutes. On the receiving end of someone else's behavior, I'm actually weakening my own sense of self-agency and personal power. So the way you spoke, you see, sometimes people think that admitting what we could do differently is a weakness. Actually, it's exactly the opposite. It actually makes the individual stronger. Honestly, and again, if you want to look that up, Manipura chakra is the chakra of personal power. So when people are like, I could have done this differently, I could have done that differently. When I take responsibility for what's within my control, I actually become a more powerful individual. Yeah, because what I'm not doing is I'm not giving away my power, my agency, my freedom to another person that I feel the way I do because of what they did. Rather, I recognize I could have done this differently. And that will be the precursor to doing things in a better way next time. Okay, so I know we only have a little bit of time left. I just wanted to hear, we asked you to consider two components. One, what was the feeling that you had of self-disclosure, regardless of content? And then second, any insights as you started the journey? Because we'll have a few minutes. We just want to begin the journey. We're not necessarily saying it stops here. Any reflections or thoughts, please? Who would like to begin? Would anyone like to begin?
I just want to say something to the last sentence you said, yes. Because to take the responsibility for a situation 100%, I cannot leave this like that because I did that all the time in my life. And when I take the 100% responsibility, there is not a sharing in responsibility. So this is when we become the overload. And so sometimes we have to make a differential with the words, because words are not adequate enough to express what we mean. So I take 100% responsibility of my action in the situation, of my action, but I'm not taking 100% responsibility of the whole situation, because I'm not anymore. And this was a very, very important learning for my life. I'm not taking 100% responsibility for the whole situation, because then I'm taking the other 50% from the other person's responsibility. I'm making them powerless. And I did that all my life, and people started hate me for that.
Sure.
It's very, very important, because I know most people have the problem that don't want to take responsibility for their life. But if you do the opposite and you take 100% responsibility, you take all power to you, and other people don't like that too much. So I think it's important for this discrimination. Is that the right word in English?
Yeah, that's the right word. I want to say a couple of things to your point, Gabrielle, which is very well taken. First of all, what first struck me was the power with which you said it. There was a lot of conviction behind it. So let me clarify. When I say 100%, I mean 100%, as you said, for us. Absolutely. Now, I'm going to also add a little additional piece. There is one aspect of philosophy that says that the situations that we enter into and end up in are also there for a reason, right? There's also karmic reasons behind why we enter into such things. So, but that doesn't mean that because to your point, and I agree with your point in the sense that we don't want to take on more responsibility than we actually have. Yes, absolutely. But what's within our field of control, we definitely want to take that, because it gives us that power. Absolutely. So that's a well taken point. Thank you for sharing and clarifying that, Gabrielle. I wanted to hear from others. Any reflections? How did you find this activity? How did it feel? Any insights? Any thoughts? And
Can I just quickly share? So I shared with Avantika a breakdown in ironic and my communication that will show up at times because we're in different rooms together as parents, as husband and wife, and then running our business. And a lot of the tension and time will show up on the running the business front, which then bleeds into other spaces. And typically in these strategy meetings, where for me the experience is not being heard, not being seen, right? And so going through the steps, where did it show up in those business meetings with my business partners, my husband? The impact is lowered vibrational energy, old insecurity surface. That's where it comes from. And what needs to change is really work on deeper work on myself, so that it doesn't always become so personal. If he says, this strategy doesn't work or something else is a priority, to not personalize it because he's just said X, but I make it mean A to Z in just that single statement. It's so personalized, right? But what Avantika also like highlighted, which I think is just brilliant, she's like, when you talk in rooms, do people often say, that's so profound, or that's amazing, or that's so great? I was like, yeah. She was like, you want to consider that you're actually getting validation and abundance from the universe, but you've pegged the expectation on the single individual to give you that validation. And of course, we don't hear it in those meetings. It totally triggers old insecurities, but B, it then shows up when you're in another room as husband, wife, or as parents. And that was just really profound.
And that's why I love listening to all of you, because if you just look at what's been shared there, that's a paradigm shift. So I may be getting lots of validation from so many places, I don't even notice. And then the one person who doesn't say anything or who disagrees with me, that becomes a significant factor. And I think that's something that many of us have gone through, and maybe even are going through at different points, that the universe can give us so much, but it's a question of consciousness. Do we notice what's actually coming, or like, which happens to many of us, a distorted view? So the 99 people who say it's profound, that voice gets turned down. One person who disagrees, that voice turns up. And then the question is, why do the negative voices why do I turn up the volume on the negative voices? And why do I tend to turn down the volume on the positive, which is a very, very interesting thing. And again, you see how powerful this self-awareness is. It's very, very subtle. And we start to see, hold on. And when you're conscious, when we're conscious of something, we can make tremendous shifts. Because now I'm aware, I can deliberately say, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to play into that. But before, it's subconscious. And that's been the real takeaway for me with the writing. I start to see, hold on, I'm doing this. And I wasn't even aware of it. Can you imagine? You can't change something that you're not even conscious that you're doing. Very, very powerful. And I love the fact that you shared, because it helps us all. I'm going to go to Christina, because Christina, I can see that I think, am I wrong? Because when I'm perceiving you on the screen, it seems that there's something coming up emotionally, or something came up emotionally for you. Is that correct? Okay, Christina, if only what you're comfortable in sharing, would you like to share anything in this regards?
Oh, that's that's the exercise. It's just as somebody would just push the button. So I would have probably a case study for today's topic. So I just with all we talked today, and is very fresh. So and it's personal probably, and that's why so touching. And what overflashed me, the question where it comes from.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. You know, and to be honest, even just what you shared so far, I can feel the impact of it. I mean, we're in different countries, but just the significance of what you're feeling is automatically coming through, you know, and that's transformative in of itself. So I just want to say thank you for doing that. Again,
yeah. I'm very surprised. I'm so emotional. So that was probably where it comes from. So it's probably that I all my life very control and very suppress emotions. So for myself and for otherwise, it's just vulnerability is yeah, you feel naked. And it looks like it somehow exploded now. I'm sorry. So, and it is just like it's this especially where it comes from, so that it's exactly what is not done. So emotions, it's my weakness. I have to work about it and not talk about it. So that's my life's probably motto. And yeah, avoid the difficult conversations and insecurities and some probably harms or just kind of pain which I thought I am already 100 years through. So I will be able to say probably later a little
No problem, no problem.
in a more structural way. Yeah.
That's fine. Whatever you have to share is fine. This is a safe space for people to share, be vulnerable, and say whatever they think or they feel, that anything that they need to share. So there's no problem, and there's no judgment either. Okay, so please, thank you so much for being open like that. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry for not being able to clearly now contribute. It's just like a moment, most likely.
You, Christina.
It was very clear. It was very clear and very powerful. So thank you very much for that. And this is the forum. See, as leaders, I'll be honest, I don't like doing superficial stuff. I like it when we can get deep like this, because these kinds of openings, you'll see we will be different people on a week-to-week basis just by going on a deeper level. There's loads of leadership books and seminars, but they don't necessarily get deep into it because it's not coming from a spiritual perspective. This book is coming from a spiritual perspective. So what it gives, it has, even just reading this book will have a spiritual effect, have an effect on consciousness. And that helps us to transform and to churn. So thank you very much for that. And there's nothing to apologize for us. Well, we're very glad to have you on the group and to share the way that you have shared. Yeah, okay. I can see Gabrielle. Thank you. I can see Gabrielle, you wanted to share something.
Yes, because Christina was talking about a weakness, and I want to say, for me, a person, from my perspective, a person can only have as much power, as much braveness a person has to show vulnerability, because we live in a world, it's I would say in a polarity world, and I think only as much emotions you show, or only as much as you're vulnerable, as much you can be powerful, because power is love, or love is power. So I think the best part is to be, I know what I'm talking about. It's not that I'm talking from theory. I went through so much tears in my life, and whatever is coming in the future, I know that I am grateful for all experience I make, because only experience gives me the compassion to feel connected to all kinds of people, because as more experience we make in all directions, not just in happiness, not just in having fun, it gives us the ability to connect to the feelings, to all these kinds of different feelings. And I want to add to the team, or to the discussion before, when you said, when we were talking about the 100% responsibility, or the half responsibility, it also both things, this is why I come back to it, because both things correlate for me. Then you said, yeah, we don't know what kind of karma we have, and like the responsibility word, I also have the strong feeling to explain my view of karma a little bit more, because a lot of people think karma means, yeah, we have to go through challenges, or often people say, that's your karma, and they mean you did something bad in the last time, so you have to solve it in this time. But to me, it's I understand the word karma, but for me, I see it from, let's say, from a different perspective, from my perspective. For me, it's every encounter with a person is, for me, an appointment my soul made with this soul. So I don't need this person. I don't judge this person that she encountered my life, and this person cannot judge me for encountering her life. So we make experience with each other, and either the other person like it, or I like it or not. It's, for me, it's an appointment, and it's a possibility, and it's every person, it's for every person optional. You see it as a possibility or as a dislike. So I changed to see it as a possibility, and it gives it a total different feeling. that doesn't mean I have already overcame that I already overcame all feelings, because I learned every challenge I make, oh, there is coming another one. So I don't want to say, yes, I made it all. That means I find out, I always think, oh, that's the hardest challenge I went through. Then another one is coming up. Then I think, oh God, that was the hardest one. And then another one is, and then I think, wow, what is this world about? So
Gabrielle, honestly, that's a well-taken point. I'm just conscious because I know we're slightly over time, so obviously we could listen to you forever, but I also want to be respectful to the other people. And I know that I think Ambika just sent a message saying that she had to go, but your point is well taken. See, karma just means activities.
yeah.
Done in the past.
I don't, sorry, I don't want to say that you are misinterpreting it.
No,
I just know that all words I maybe wrongly understood in my life, I just want to make clear for other people, hopefully, that it's a sort of, I always feel like a mother. I have to make clear that there is no misunderstanding. So excuse me for always or often interfering. It's my motherhood feeling.
It's not an interference at all. Again, we want the environment to be open to everyone. So no worries. I was just adding to what you're saying, that it just basically means things that we've done in the past or things that we're doing now and whatever comes as a result of it. Absolutely. But I'm conscious that we're over time. I don't want to keep people longer, but please, we want to encourage you. You can continue on this practice. Again, writing about things that you're comfortable to write about, but the more deep and honest and open you are, genuinely open. Rikin and I are dealing with a situation where someone, they may not be fully open with themselves. They may not fully accept their responsibility in something, but the more we do it, the more powerful we become. But it requires, and this is why I like this exercise, this practice is a practice to become humble. People in the modern age, they're scared to be humble. They're scared to write the honest truth. Okay, the truth is actually it was my fault. Or the truth is I didn't have the courage to be honest and open. Or the truth is I was a bit lazy here. Or the truth is I was greedy. But there's no one judging us on the page, you see? And that's what I love about this group. We can become much more powerful leaders and much more genuinely humble by being honest. Because humility in the Vedic teaching, it means truthfulness. Whereas what happens in much of society is I'm more concerned with how I look than with how I actually am. And that's the number one enemy of real development. So thank you so much for your time. Gabrielle, Christina, Jide, is that, have I pronounced it properly? Okay, Jide as well, Rikin. And we look forward to continuing the journey, but please, I encourage you to experiment with this practice, this journaling practice. It's incredibly profound, easy, universally accessible to all of us at any time. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you.